as the US and the Philippines carry out their annual joint military exercises in the area. 6 countries claim sovereignty over areas in South China Sea, claiming sovereignty over areas there. The ICC says the number of maritime disputes in the area has increased dramatically in recent years. Since last year, the US has been refocusing its military attention on Asia and strengthening ties with the Philippines. The Philippines' biggest warship has been involved in a standoff with 2 Chinese surveillance vessels at a remote shoal since last week. Well, Stephanie Kleine-Ahlbrandt is the China Northeast Asia Project Director of the International Crisis Group based in Beijing, and she joins me now from there. Welcome to BBC World News. What do you see as the most threatening actions and words now that will provoke some instability?
Well, I think it's interesting to note that this incident in Scarborough Shoal is actually a fishing incident at its base. But these types of fishing incidents have increasingly become proxies for the larger disputes between countries over sovereignty in the South China Sea, which, as you mentioned, is claimed by 6 different countries. And what makes this dangerous is that there's a military buildup amongst the countries in the region, including the Chinese PLAN and the Vietnamese and the Philippines, who are increasingly cooperating with the United States, India, Japan, and even New Zealand as they try to build up their military forces. And there's at the same time a buildup of law enforcement vessels, which are actually in some ways more dangerous than Navy vessels because they're more easy to deploy and they get involved in more incidents. And all of this is taking place in the context of rising nationalism, which constrains countries like China and the Philippines and Vietnam from de-escalating these incidents when they start, which is part of the reason that we've seen this incident go on for 10 full days, despite full-on diplomacy both by the Philippines and China.
Well, your report says that China needs a consistent policy on the South China Sea if it's to avoid dispute. Does that where the burden of mediation lies on China?
Well, China is partly to blame, but I think one can't underestimate the fact that countries such as Vietnam and the Philippines also have reason to be fishing further and further out in disputed territories due to overfishing and pollution. And they're also countries that are going to be constrained to have to pull some of those resources out of the South China Sea, which means that they're going to be engaging in incidents that China sees as assertive and China feels that it has to respond to. But at the same time, China's own policy conundrum is that it has 11 different ministerial agencies all involved in some way in the South China Sea, a handful of which compete with each other for budget and resources and power. And we even see local governments, for example, pushing the envelope and rising and contributing to rising tensions in the sea by pushing local tourism projects, by ensuring that their fishermen go further and further out. So I think that there are a lot of different factors in the region that could cause an incident that could be difficult to de-escalate.
Stephanie Kleine-Ahlbrandt, thank you very much for joining us from Beijing. Headlines in just a moment. Also, we have this